Good morning, folks. Welcome to News at Ben. An altogether better week this week. I remember being slightly sorry for people who listened to my last News at Ben a week ago, because it was really doom and gloom, the whole thing with the budget and what had been going on in Southport and so on. But we've had an altogether different week this week. And obviously the big news has been the American election and the wipeout of the Democrats. They've lost the Senate. It looks like they're going to lose the House of Representatives, and they've obviously lost the presidency to President Trump. And the reason I mention Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate is because last time President Trump was president, he didn't have control of both houses, and that slightly neutered his ability to do what he wanted to. This time round, it's his second and last term. So he's got nothing to lose by absolutely driving home his agenda, and he'll be able to drive that agenda home because it looks like he's going to have control of both houses. That is phenomenal. I haven't heard many people comment on the total control he's going to have and his lack of fear of putting a foot wrong because he won't be seeking re-election. And these are two things we should really take on board. And that does mean that we can welcome what I call a nationist pro-democratic agenda from the President of the United States, a resurgent USA, a USA that will once again, I hope, believe in itself, believe in its borders, establish its borders, enforce its borders, promote its private enterprise, cut its own taxes, deregulate, ditch net zero, and champion its people. Now, the reason I welcome all of that, by the way, is not going to be brilliant for the UK. Some of that will be in competition with the UK. But I welcome it partly for that reason, because what we need to do is reset the narrative for Western civilization. And the biggest component, the biggest country, obviously in Western civilization, is the United States of America. And if that country resets its agenda, if it becomes more of the kind of USA that we knew in the 1980s, a self-confident USA, strongly armed, believing in itself, promotion of private enterprise, etc., then this country will, under its current narrative, the current way that we're governed, which is highly anti-democratic, is the way I see it, anti-business, anti-aspiration, anti-wealth creation, pro-immigration, open borders, we will have to reset our narrative. We won't be able to survive with a strong USA doing what it's doing if we don't similarly reset the way we are governed. And so I'm hoping that at the very least, this will bring enormous pressure on the Labour Party to cease its self-harming policies and to wake up and recognise that the only way to stay competitive, the only way to keep up with the USA is to follow the USA. And that's most likely if this government is hung out to dry, if it's not given any leg up to try and protect itself. So we must, in the UK, call this government out for what it is. We mustn't give it any succor. We mustn't wait for the pressure of the USA to come home to come to bear on this government. What we need to do is to keep the pressure full on. And of course, that can be done in a number of ways. The first, and we've seen a lot of it this week, is to simply point out how absurd the Labour Party has been in its support of the Democrats, sending its own campaigners across to the USA, and how utterly abusive they've been of the president-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump. And first and foremost, as I'm sure you all would have seen this week and are well aware of, is David Lammy's ridiculous comments about the president. And no matter what he and Starmer now say about it being in a different time when he was a backbencher, he wasn't in the cabinet, it's not going to hold any water with Donald Trump. Donald Trump will see Lammy for what he is, which is an intellectual pygmy, a man who's riven with identity politics and has absolutely nothing to offer to the Anglosphere. And I hope that President Trump will give him absolutely no truck. And he should treat Starmer in precisely the same way. I'm sure he hasn't forgotten the similarly critical comments that Starmer made about him, or that Starmer took the knee to the BLM movement, something that President Trump absolutely abhors. And the other thing, which I think is terrific for this country, is that obviously Donald Trump loves the UK and he loads the EU. And so that again promotes the democratic narrative, the narrative for the nation state of the UK, the promotion of British interest. It will give us cover and help, I hope, the political discourse in that direction away from the EU. We've all seen how Starmer is not so surreptitiously, quite openly, really taking us back towards the EU. And he's doing that in a number of ways. And first and foremost, we mustn't lose sight of this, I mentioned it at News at Ben a couple of weeks ago, is his desire to integrate with the European Defence Union, what they call permanent structured cooperation in Europe. That is the European equivalent to NATO, but it differs from NATO in one very material respect, and that is this. When NATO member states come together, they come together as members of NATO under joint command, and they do so willingly. If we were to join PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation, that is military interoperability with European Union armed forces, and here's the big point, with the European Union's political aims at heart and under the direction of Brussels. That's very different from NATO, where we come together willingly for our collective benefit. For PESCO, read EU benefit and EU control. And I'm sure Donald Trump will be saying to members of NATO that if you want the continued protection of the United States, you better put your hands in your pockets and increase your defence spending. European Union member states are absolutely hopeless when it comes to putting their hands in their back pockets. And frankly, so have we become in recent years. We've neglected our armed forces. We've neglected the defence of this country. And it's because successive governments haven't cared about it, but Trump is going to make us care. And I hope with the strings that he attaches to NATO, and this is an idea that I very much wish he will take on board, that it should come with a promise that no NATO member similarly joins the European Defence Union. You can't be in both. You're either a member of NATO or you're a member of Permanent Structured Cooperation. You can't have both. And if Trump can see himself through to insisting on that, it'll be a massive nail in what I hope will be a coffin of the EU's desire to become itself a sort of imperial force with its own armed forces. What we're going to see with Trump in the next 4 years, and perhaps with President Vance after that, and wouldn't that be a terrific thing, is a period of governance where nation states discover themselves, where we cease to be governed by global principles, where transgender ideology doesn't trump all else, where immigration is cut back, where Western civilized values are promoted. And so I'll leave you with this thought. It's a much more positive week than it was last week. We have cause for optimism. And don't forget, today is Remembrance Sunday. Let's go out to our respective memorials in our towns, our villages, hamlets, wherever you are. I'll be at the cenotaph this morning, and let's pay our respects to those people that helped create the nation state that is the United Kingdom and then protected it and gave up their lives for doing so. Let's celebrate the cultural values that they bequeathed to us and on whose giant shoulders we now stand. Have a great Sunday. Thank you very much.